All right, so we left off last class looking at our alternative sweeteners, our sugar, alcohols, and our non-nutritive sweeteners. Now we'll take a closer look at some of the common non-nutritive sweeteners and how they compare to sugar. So first one we have is aspartame, which is about 200 times sweeter than sugar. And so a common brand name you'll see is NutraSweet, and it has been widely tested for safety and provides nearly 0 calories because, again, it's so much sweeter than sugar. You don't need the same amount. And then you have saccharin, which is one of the oldest, if not the first, artificial sweeteners. It's been used for over 100 years. Its safety has been questioned in the past, but current evidence shows that it is safe as long as you stay within normal intake levels. So I would say as long as you're consuming less than 9 packets a day for the average person, it's relatively safe. Let's see, you also have neotame, which is extremely potent, about 7 to 13,000 times sweeter than sugar. And because it's so concentrated, manufacturers use very tiny amounts. You have sucralose, which also better known as Splenda. Chemically, it's made from a sucrose molecule that's been modified so the body can't digest it, meaning that it passes through unchanged and provides no calories, so your body doesn't absorb it at all. And that's what you'll see a lot of the non-nutritive sweeteners. Either they have a non-digestible quality to them so that they just pass right through, or they are 600 times sweeter than regular sugar, and so we need it in very trace amounts in a lot of products. Let's see, you also have highly purified stevia leaf extracts. So think of Truvia, Sweet Leaf are some common brand name examples. Again, they're going to be about 200 to 400 times sweeter than sugar. Also, they are plant derived. And then you have Advantame as well, which is probably the sweetest of all of the non-nutritive sweeteners, around 20,000 times sweeter than sugar. Now, although there has been plenty of research that shows that these non-nutritive sweeteners are relatively safe, there are still some concerns that we should be aware of. Now, the safety, like I said, of non-nutritive sweeteners has been closely reviewed for decades, and both scientists and regulatory agencies have studied them extensively and found that for the most part, they are relatively safe. Now, there are some issues associated with them. So, for instance, aspartame, which is made up of 2 amino acids, right? You have phenylalanine and aspartic acid. Kind of sounds like something you'd expect to hear in Breaking Bad with phenyl and acid, but phenylalanine and aspartic acid, both amino acids. And for most people, these amino acids are completely safe and naturally occur in many protein-containing foods. However, individuals with a rare inherited disorder called phenylketonuria, or PKU, cannot metabolize phenylalanine properly. And in those individuals, byproducts build up in the bloodstream and can cause serious problems, including brain damage, as well as other adverse effects, potentially even coma and death. And because of this, products with aspartame must carry a PKU warning label. And so, since its approval in 1981, aspartame has been blamed for conditions like cancer, immune disorders, and chronic headaches. But after decades of rigorous studies, there's no conclusive evidence linking aspartame or any of the approved non nutritive sweeteners to those diseases, uh, as long as they're consumed within the safe limits. Now, the issue would be if you're consuming a lot of these beverages that maybe have these artificial sweeteners, you're not really keeping track of how many packets you could be consuming through the day. So there is a chance at that point that you are potentially consuming enough to experience the adverse effects such as colon cancer with some of these non-nutritive sweeteners if you're over consuming. So to ensure safety, the FDA and other health agencies have set acceptable daily intakes. Again, that's going to be the maximum amount considered safe to consume each day over a lifetime. So, for example, you have that with caffeine already. Now, for these non nutritive sweeteners, staying under the ADI or acceptable daily intake for aspartame would be equivalent to consuming dozens of diet sodas in one day for an average adult, which is far more than I would say most adults are going to consume, right? Most people probably aren't having 12 sodas in a day, even more than 12 sodas in a day. So you will probably be fine with most of these non-nutritive sweeteners. So these numbers just show how much of each sweetener a person could theoretically consume every single day for a lifetime and still be considered safe. So, for example, aspartame, you would have to drink about 18 to 19 cans of diet cola a day to hit the ADI. You have for saccharin, the limit is going to be equal to about that 9 to 12 sweetener packets per day. And again, remember, this is based off of your scale individual, which is going to be somewhere around 5'7", 170 pounds. So if you're much larger than that, chances are you might be able to consume slightly more. If you're much smaller than that, maybe you need to really focus on consuming about 70% of the ADI, or less, obviously. Let's see, for sucralose, you see you're going to have to consume about 6 cans of diet soda to reach its ADI, excuse me. And so some sweeteners like Advantame have extremely high thresholds, and so for example, nearly like 5,000 packets in a single day would be just under the ADI, and so these values show just how high the safety margins are for these non-nutritive sweeteners. So again, they are considered safe for the general population as long as they're not over-consumed. Pretty much just like sugar or anything else, right? Sugar isn't bad for you until you consume. Then it leads to obesity, metabolic syndrome, heart disease, all kinds of issues. So overconsumption could still cause health issues, not because of the sweeteners necessarily themselves, but because of just broader metabolic dietary effects. Like I said, just like with sugar. Okay, so now we will get into our complex carbs, right? So we talked about our simple sugars, our monosaccharides, our disaccharides, and then we got off on our artificial sweeteners for a short stint. Now we're getting back on track with our complex carbohydrates, which are just simply large chains of sugar molecules, so three or more monosaccharides bonded together. And so they're going to be categorized into two main groups, just like we saw with our simple sugar. So remember the flow chart, you had your carbohydrates, and then you had your simple sugars and complex carbs. And under the simple sugars side, you had your monosaccharides, your disaccharides. Well, under your complex carbs side, you have your polysaccharides and your oligosaccharides. So your polysaccharides are these really long chains, typically 10 or more monosaccharides that are bonded together. And it's common for polysaccharides to come in both digestible and non-digestible forms. So things like starch are digestible, while fiber forms like cellulose are not. Now, oligosaccharides is going to refer to that intermediate ground between simple and complex carbs, I guess you could think of it, because it's going to be anywhere from 3 to 10 monosaccharides. So the prefix oligo means few, and poly means many. So you have your monosaccharides in your simple sugars, mono meaning one. You have your disaccharides still in your simple sugars, meaning two. You have your oligosaccharides, meaning a few, so between 3 and 10, and then your polysaccharides, meaning many, 10 or more monosaccharides bonded together. And so the two most common oligosaccharides found in food are ribose and stachyose. So ribose is going to be composed of glucose, fructose, and galactose, and is non-digestible. Stachyose is made up of 1 glucose, 2 galactose, and 1 fructose molecule, and is also non-digestible. And because we lack enzymes to fully break these down, they tend to be fermented by bacteria in the large intestine, which can often cause gas, which is, I guess you could say, a fun side effect of eating things like beans and legumes that are very rich in oligosaccharides. So here's a closer look of where we actually find oligosaccharides in the diet. So you have ribose and stachyose, which are found in foods like onions, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, broccoli, legumes, whole grains, and they're all nutrient rich, but also known for their gas producing reputation. Now, legumes are part of the Fabaceae family, which is, think of it like the pea family. So common examples, you have your beans, chickpeas, peas, lentils, soybeans, which are all technically seeds from these plants. And other oligosaccharides that you might see in food include inulin and oligofructose. Oligofructose is actually a subcategory of inulin. It's basically a shorter chain version with less than 10 monosaccharides, which typically is composed of fructose units, sometimes with a terminal glucose molecule at the end, meaning you have a chain of fructose units, and then at the very end of the chain you have 1 glucose molecule. They're often going to be found in foods like chicory root, onions, garlic, leeks, legumes, asparagus, wheat would be another common example. And because these oligosaccharides are non-digestible, they pass through the stomach and small intestine relatively intact, so our enzymes can't break them down, and so they pass through the stomach and small intestine where they reach the large intestine. And this is where gut bacteria ferment them for energy, producing gases or flatulence as a byproduct, which explains why beans and other certain vegetables have this classic side effect when you consume them. All right, now we will transition more into our polysaccharides. So both starch and glycogen are considered glucose polymers, meaning that they're made up of hundreds of glucose molecules that are all linked together. And they serve as major storage forms of carbohydrate energy. So we see in plants primarily going to be starch. In animals, we see it'll be glycogen. So in plants, starch is the main storage of polysaccharides, and it's composed of two types of glucose chains. You have amylose, which is a linear polymer, meaning you have a bunch of glucose molecules that are linked together in a relatively straight line. And then you have amylopectin, which is a branched polymer where you'll see glucose molecules start to branch off into opposite directions. And you'll see plants primarily store starch in their seeds, their roots, and tubers, all of which are going to be the main parts that we typically eat. So some common food sources would include bread and cereals, so anything made from wheat, rice, barley, and oats. You have your vegetables like corn, squash, beans, as well as peas. And then you also have your tubers like potatoes, yams. You have taro, which is starchy root vegetable in Malaysia that's going to be similar to a potato. You also have cassava, which is another starchy vegetable, kind of has a nutty flavor from West Africa, or the western part of the African continent. And then you also have jicama, which is a root that has a mild sweet flavor, kind of similar to a water chestnut, which is found in Mexico. It's often called a Mexican potato or Mexican turnip. Now, maltodextrin and dextrin are modified starches often added to sports drinks as well as energy bars. And they're used to increase the carbohydrate content because of their high glycemic index. So they're digested and absorbed very rapidly, which provides a quick source of energy, which is ideal for athletic performance and recovery. And so regardless of the source, remember that each gram of carbohydrate is still going to provide 4 kilocalories. All right, now specifically looking at glycogen, again, we see this is going to be the storage form of carbohydrate in animals, and it's a highly branched polysaccharide made entirely of glucose molecules, kind of similar to amylopectin in structure, but even more extensively branched. So you see amylopectin at the top right there. The glycogen, I'm right now blocking glycogen, but you can see the GLY is down below as figure C. And then you have your amylose at the top, which you see is just that perfect linear connection of glucose molecules. So the body stores glycogen in limited amounts. So only about 600 grams total is going to be distributed throughout the well-nourished individual. So roughly 500 grams are going to be stored in the skeletal muscle and about 100-ish grams in the liver. And so muscle glycogen serves as an immediate energy source for muscle contraction, while liver glycogen helps maintain blood glucose levels between meals. However, most animals foods are not great sources of glycogen, and that's because muscle glycogen breaks down very rapidly after death. So even though glycogen is often found in animals for storage, the actual consumption of animal foods gives very little glycogen because it's breaking down after death due to enzymatic activity that continues post-mortem. So as the muscles contract, energy stores are depleted. And so by the time the meat actually reaches our plate, virtually all of the glycogen has been converted to lactate and other byproducts. And then moving on to fiber. So we already know that plants store energy as starch, but they also use complex carbohydrates to create supportive structures and protective seed coats. And these structures contribute to the fiber content of our diet. Now, most forms of dietary fiber are non-digestible plant materials, meaning we can't break them down with our digestive enzymes, and they're mostly polysaccharides. But not all of them are purely carbohydrate based. So there are two major types of dietary fiber. You have soluble and insoluble. So soluble fiber includes pectins, gums, mucilages, and some hemicellulose as well. And these types dissolve or swell in water, forming a gel-like substance that can help slow digestion and lower blood cholesterol levels. And then you have insoluble fiber, on the other hand, which will be your cellulose. The majority of hemicelluloses. You also have lignin as well, and lignin is the only major fiber component that is not a carbohydrate. So these fibers, so pause, just side note, they are the only non-carbohydrate fiber. And then, so these insoluble fibers do not dissolve in water, and instead they add bulk to the stool and actually promote regular bowel movements. So most plant foods contain both forms of fiber, though usually one is going to be more abundant depending on the plant food. So, for instance, soluble fiber is found in oat bran, oatmeal, beans, apples, carrots, oranges, and again, going to be great for heart health. Whereas insoluble fiber is going to be abundant in a lot of whole grains, brown rice, for instance, and it's especially helpful for digestive regularity. So when we look at what makes starch digestible and fiber non-digestible, well, we're primarily looking at the bonds. So the bonds that connect glucose units in starch are called alpha 1 glycosidic bonds, while the bonds found in dietary fiber are beta 1 4 glycosidic bonds, which we kind of talked about earlier with lactose, right? When we're looking at the difference between the alpha and beta bonds. And so the difference sounds relatively small, but structurally it's significant. So alpha bonds form in a way that creates a more open structure that allows digestive enzymes to easily attach and break them apart, which is why we can then digest starch. In contrast, those beta bonds form a more rigid structure, and our bodies don't produce the enzyme cellulase, which would be needed to break them apart. And as a result, these beta bonds remain intact throughout the digestive tract, which is why fiber passes through largely undigested. And even though we can't digest fiber directly, it's not entirely useless. So, in the large intestine, certain bacteria, which is part of your gut microbiota, can ferment some fibers, and this will produce short chain fatty acids that can be absorbed and used as a small source of energy. However, this fermentation also produces gases and other waste products, which again explains some of the digestive side effects whenever you consume a high fiber diet. So, something interesting about oligosaccharides like inulin or oligofructose, we see that they are actually the main ingredient in prebiotics. So, prebiotics are non digestible food components that serve as fuel for the beneficial bacteria that are living in our colon. And these good bacteria, or your gut microbiota, uses prebiotics as an energy source, allowing them to grow and support overall gut health. Now, it's important to note the difference between prebiotics and probiotics. So, prebiotics feed the bacteria, probiotics are the live microorganisms themselves found in foods or supplements such as yogurt or sauerkraut or kombucha. And together they form what's often called a gut microbiome connection, which plays a major role in digestion as well as immune function and even mental health as well. So we've seen just having a healthy gut microbiota affects all realms of the individual. So obviously, if you're squinting all the time, you're going to get wrinkles faster than other individuals. But what we see is that individuals with a healthy gut microbiome can actually, or I shouldn't say can, having that healthy gut microbiome actually reduces the amount of wrinkles on the individual and how quickly it appears that someone ages, believe it or not. So consuming these oligosaccharides have several additional benefits. So it supports heart and gastrointestinal as well as bone health. It helps regulate blood glucose levels as well as blood pressure. And it also assists with body weight management. And like I said, it can even have other side effects that we don't maybe necessarily think of when we think of bacteria in our gut, but it can even improve an individual's mood. So research shows some effects can actually occur within just a few hours of consumption. So remember, the bacteria living in our gut uh, aren't just passive. They help break down food, they produce certain vitamins, and yes, they also generate gases as byproducts of fermentation. So, again, although soluble and insoluble fibers can't be digested by humans, they still provide important health benefits. So, with insoluble fiber, again, this is going to include cellulose and hemicelluloses and lignin as well, which again is that unique form because it's not a carbohydrate. Uh, but anyway, we see insoluble fiber increases fecal bulk and speeds up the passage of material through the gastrointestinal tract, which helps prevent constipation and promotes regularity. And you'll find it in your whole wheat, your rye bread, or just rye in general, rye products, brown rice, and most vegetables, as well as wheat bran and whole grains. Now, your soluble fiber is going to include pectins, gums, your mucilages, and some hemicelluloses as well. Now, soluble fiber dissolves or swells in water, and it forms a gel that ends up slowing stomach emptying and slows glucose absorption, which helps stabilize our blood sugar levels. And it can also lower blood cholesterol by binding to bile acids in the intestine. And we see that soluble fiber can be found in a variety of food sources like apples, bananas, a lot of citrus fruits, carrots, oats, psyllium seeds, barley, beans, and even food thickeners that are added to processed items. So, in short, to summarize the table or the benefits of insoluble and soluble fiber, you have insoluble that helps keep things moving through the GI tract and adds bulk. Soluble fiber helps with cholesterol and blood sugar control. Now, going back to the debate of whole versus refined grain products, we see that when the FDA defines whole grains, it means that the product must contain the same proportions of all three key grain components that are found in the intact grain. So that includes the starchy endosperm, the oily germ, as well as the fiber-rich bran as well. So when we break those components down, we see that the bran is that outer layer of the grain. It's going to be rich in your fiber, your B vitamins, as well as minerals. It's what gives us or gives whole grains their chewy texture and their high nutrient content. Now, the germ is the embryo of the seed. It's the part that would grow into a new plant. It contains healthy fats, vitamins, important phytochemicals like antioxidants, and the endosperm is that starchy center which serves as a nutrient source for the germ. So it's primarily made up of carbohydrates and protein and provide a lot of energy but very few vitamins and minerals. So your endosperm is where you get the bulk of your macronutrients, your carbs, proteins. The germ and endosperm going to be where you get a lot of your other important nutrients like your micronutrients. Now, when grains are refined, they lose that bran and germ, and that leaves pretty much just the starchy endosperm behind. And that's why refined grain products like white bread, white rice, most pastas are lower in fiber and micronutrients unless they're enriched or fortified later on in that process. And so when you see whole grain on a label, it's worth checking to make sure that all three of those components are still included in the same natural ratio that it would be seen out in the wild while it's growing. And so here's just an illustration to help you picture it. What goes into producing white flour specifically. So white flour comes from refined wheat, where the bran, which you can see here, as well as the germ, are removed, leaving only the starchy endosperm, which is again that white layer that's rich of carbohydrates that would have fed the oily germ. And remember, the bran, that little outer layer that we see right there, is where most fiber and B vitamins are found. And the germ, which we see right there, is going to contain the majority of your healthy fats, minerals like zinc and phosphorus, as well as magnesium, that you would get from consuming this plant. And all of these are going to play important roles in supporting immune system and overall metabolism of an individual. And when those two parts are milled away, what's left is just the endosperm, which is primarily starch and protein, which is great if you need calories. But again, when we look at the general American population, calories aren't a concern as far as getting enough of them. It's really getting too much of them that is the problem with most Western societies. And so when those two parts are milled away, the bran and the the germ, you are left with the endosperm, and that gives us our white flour, which is smooth in texture. It has very long shelf life, but it also means that it's much lower in our key nutrients and fibers that we would get from whole wheat flour. So many white flours today are enriched, meaning that some of those lost nutrients like iron and certain B vitamins are added back in, but they still lack that natural fiber and a lot of minerals or phytochemicals from that original grain. And so when you're trying to figure out if something is truly a whole grain product, the best thing you can do is read the ingredient list, not just what's on the front of the package, what they want you to see, right? So look for terms like whole wheat, whole oat, whole grain, brown rice, or other grains with the word whole in front of them listed as one of the first ingredients. Because remember, the ingredients are listed in descending order. So that's going to tell us that your product actually contains the entire grain kernel, which includes that bran, the germ, and the endosperm, rather than just refined flour, which is primarily that endosperm. And so, according to FDA labeling guidelines, a food can still be called a whole grain as long as it contains intact, ground, cracked, or flaked seeds from cereal grains in the same proportion found in the original grain. However, food companies often market products as made with whole grains, even though it contains or includes very small amounts of whole grain flour. And so that's why it's smart to check the ingredient list very carefully, just like with your juices, where it's made with 100% juice, and then you look and it's at the very bottom of the ingredient label because they put like 2 droplets of 100% juice in their water and sugar concoction. So if enriched wheat flour or bleached flour comes before whole wheat flour, that means it's mostly refined grain that just has a touch of whole grain added for the labeling process. So that's again why it's so important to look at the actual ingredient list, because it's going to be listed in descending order from which ingredients are most abundant to least abundant in that product.